Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Comedy. My name is Gary Michaels and this channel is dedicated to new comedians. So if you are starting out in your comedy career, then hit that subscribe button and never miss a future episode. If you are returning to this channel and you've already hit that button, a big welcome back to you. On today's video, I am going to give you 5 tips for a better intro when performing stand-up comedy. So do try and implement as many of these tips as you can each time you go on stage. Play around with them, see which one works for you best, and I guarantee you will get more laughs quicker the next time you go on because you can come on from a more creative angle. If I can give you anything today, it's that. Open up your set, more creative, and connect the entire audience together, which is what we're always trying to do, connecting the audience together with each other, as well as being able to deliver fantastic material in front of all of them. Here we go with tip number 1. Opening up with how you're going to be different or the same as the acts that have gone on before you. By connecting yourself with the acts that have already performed that night is a great way of connecting the entire show together. So think of it like you're not just one comic going up on stage delivering your one individual set. Surely that's what it is, but the more you can connect what's going on to the audience in the room, the better. Connect. Certainly at lower level gigs, you don't see this done because the acts coming up on stage are only thinking about their own set and how they go over. And that's a fine way to think about it. But you can also go a step further and think about the audience and the entire show. So you can connect your material even with a callback based on what somebody else said. If somebody else said a funny line about a perception they have on a person, perhaps you could open up with being that perception and apologizing for it. Or perhaps you could be so different to all the other comics on the bill and you could explain in a comical sense why that might be. Or you might be more normal than all the other comics on the bill and you can explain in a funny sense why that might be. But certainly opening up the dialogue at the beginning of your set to connect it to all the other comics and what's going on in that night is a fun, creative, funny way of going about intro to your set. And if you can do that, it's different as default to what all the other comics are doing because most of them are going to open up with asking the audience how they are and going into their material or going into a punchline at the beginning. Connect to the audience, connect the whole show together is one different way of doing it, and it's a fun way, and it's number 1. Number 2 is opening up dialogue with the audience based on your first punchline you have. So let's say you have a funny line you're thinking to say on stage and you have written a backstory from it. Instead of delivering that backstory, you could directly go into talking to the audience and get to your punchline based on what they said. You steer the conversation very quickly to where you want it to be, and then you deliver that punchline like you're just saying a remark based on what they've said. So you've given a punchline in your styling, and it's your styling because you already have a story for it in case it doesn't work with the audience. So if the audience doesn't go to a place where you want the conversation to go, if that part hasn't been successful, you know you can go into your story that has jokes within it and then deliver your punchline as a kind of a fallback. But you can certainly play, knowing you have that joke learnt off, you can play with opening up dialogue to the audience, because if you can get there very, very quickly and deliver a punchline straight away in the first 10 seconds while talking to an audience member, that is a fantastic way of waking everyone in the room up, getting the audience connected together because you've brought them in on what the joke is. It hasn't just been another comedian coming on stage and delivering a story for him to get to a punchline. You've done it in a different way, which is opening up dialogue with the audience. That's number 2. Here is number 3. Opening up with material based on the room. This is a go-to all the time. It's probably my favorite way of opening up a set. Before you go on stage, before the show starts, you should be jotting down any funny thing you can say about the room. That is one only reason to bring a notepad to the show. You've already got the material and your jokes and your stories all learned off as much as you possibly can at home. That work is done. The reason you write in a venue before the show starts is you jot down a few funny things you can say about the room. It doesn't have to be in much detail. You just have to point out a few funny observations you've had, because the chances are the audiences have had similar observations of their own when they've entered the room for the first time and sat down. So by you getting up on stage and breaking that little bit of focus to get it all on you and breaking the attention that they have in different parts and addressing the room in the funny way you know how to do, it lets them know that you are aware of the surroundings, and it's also a great way of getting all the focus on you, connecting everyone in the room. But if you're uncomfortable with talking directly to the audience and opening up dialogue with them, then playing and talking about the room they are in is another thing you all have in common. And yet again, as I said, it's a great way of getting them on side. So get them connected with each other in the room. They all feel good result, and the energy rises when they are connected, and the focus then goes to the correct place, which is directly on you. Do that at the beginning, room material, and you cannot go wrong, because if you have noticed it, the chances are the majority of a comedy loving audience have already noticed it, and all you have to do is deliver it on the microphone, get a laugh from it, and then they will be open to listening to your great material that you have planned. Here's number 4. Opening up with an absolute crazy statement and then saying more on that later. If you can tease a story, or if you can tease how you got to an opinion or a punchline, then they are going to be waiting for it, as long as the material you have written and learnt off in between that time is entertaining. You don't want to lose them through that. But a great way of going on stage and shaking them and getting that focus by really delivering and announcing your approach to the stage is by saying an absolutely crazy thing in order to get the focus all on you. And it can be anything at all. It can be really over the line, and as long as you can address it and it's not very offensive. Just because I say crazy, it doesn't mean offensive. You don't want to walk on stage and say the most offensive line straight away. You want to win them over first, but certainly you can say an absurd and crazy and bizarre line to open up. It could be a hobby you're interested in. After saying your name, you could say, I enjoy doing this, or I enjoy thinking about this. And it could be a crazy thing, and then say, but more on that later. It will get a laugh as a default if it's constructed well and you deliver it well with great timing. And also, it'll have them thinking, I wonder if they are actually going to approach that again. And you can put this tease within your set throughout your 5 or 10 minute or 20 minute set. You could call back to this saying, we'll get more on that later. And each time you go back to it, you can give them a little bit more information about what it is you're saying. And then you could deliver the final blow at the very end of your set and finish the exact same way you started, which is also not only a great way of entering a set, but a great way of combining the entire set in a neat little package, regardless of how crazy the tangents are in between those pockets of information. So that's a fun, creative writing and creative performance way of going about performing and opening up a set. Here is tip number 5. Mentioning how great it is to be at that particular gig and how awful your previous gig was. Now, this is more of an idea for a joke than anything else, but everyone has a different place they can go to when I give them this technique, and it's a lot of fun. Here's what it is. I want you to imagine and create a fictitious gig that you were at before performing at this gig that you're now delivering your material at. But I want you to go as crazy as you possibly can and describe just how awful that gig was. What were the venue like? And I want you to imagine the worst type of venue for comedy you can imagine. The funniest type of place you can perform comedy in. And I want the audience to be the funniest type of audience. And I want the kind of people running the gig, the funniest type of people. I want you to get as creative as you can. And so when you say, it's an honor to be here performing in front of all you, my last gig wasn't this great, you can start to construct this absolutely absurd scenario where your last gig was beyond imaginably awful, and it was just the worst thing ever, and you can get a lot of fun out of that, and you can call back to that throughout your entire set. Every time you get a laugh from a joke, you can call back to, well, that didn't work out last time at my last gig, and it can be going even crazier than you mentioned before. So that's a fun thing to think about every time you approach a stage. Thank them for being there at that gig to watch you, because that's what's also going to be said by a lot of other comedians. But you go one step further and give them a scenario of your last performance and make it as absurd as you possibly can, which is a fun writing and a fun way to deliver material on stage, and will also have you standing out different than all the other comics at your beginning. Those were my top 5 tips at the moment for a different way of going about introducing yourself in front of an audience on your next live stand-up show. If you've liked this video, you've already hit the like button, and I appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button and join the community. Of course, if you want to help out even further, you can do so by becoming a member. Information in how to do so is in the description box. And as always, a big thank you from me for checking out this video. Click any of the links on the screen and get more tutorial videos. I will keep them coming as fast as I possibly can. Until then, I will see you on the next one. Right on.